What is up, everybody? Welcome to Sales Stories in Real Life. I am your host, Alex Bruschi, and this is the show where professional salespeople share their experiences on times that they were being sold to and they were in the buyer's seat. If you can't tell, I am ecstatic about today's guest. Have admired her for a very long time. She puts out some of the best content you've ever seen. Welcome to the show, Sam McKenna. A little intro on her. She is a 15-year enterprise sales veteran, broke 13 sales records, many of them first time as a woman to do so, and finished her corporate career at LinkedIn. And from that, started #Sam Sales Consulting with no funding. She employs a full team of 13 women where they have amassed 160 clients in under 3 years. Sam, you are a legend. You can take it away whenever you're ready. We're excited to hear from you.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Thanks for the great intro as well. Really, really nice to be here. I think we could crack open all kinds of topics today, from what it's like to be sold to, tips and tricks I have as a buyer on the other side of the table, tips and tricks I have to be a great seller consistently over time. I think we could probably fill up 8 hours of content if we aren't careful. So yeah, wherever you want to dive in first, I'm excited to chat sales, as I always am.
So we talked a little bit about this pre-show. I think this is an awesome place to start because then we could pick these apart thereafter.
Yeah.
Obviously, at Sam Sales Consulting, you guys are helping folks to break into top accounts, right? Use LinkedIn Navigator successfully. So let's just kind of start from the top. What are some of the plays that you've seen run successfully?
I think this is really interesting. So, you mentioned the 13 sales records broken over my career. And I think, like, if we look at the various companies, so I was at 3 different companies before I started Sam Sales in my sales career. So I've been in the 15 years, this is officially my 4th play. And I think one of the things that was funny for me when I actually got started, right, and thinking about the plays that I ran, they were just things that came naturally to me. And I didn't even know what they were. I didn't even know what the words were behind what I was doing. So one of my earliest leaders is a guy named Chuck Broadman. And I was doing a couple of things in terms of outbound sales messaging. And he was like, you really know how to run like demand generation. And I nodded thoughtfully. And then I immediately Googled, what is demand generation? Because I had absolutely no idea what it was. And I find that for a lot of top performers, right, that they do great things. They do these plays and they don't know what they are because they're just innate to them. I will say, from some of the plays that have been really successful to me, it always, like from the start of my career, has started with show me, you know me. And if you've not followed me before, if you're brand new to me and you're like, this rhymes and what a great saying that is, it is the idea of showing our buyers that we know them, whether it is our very first outreach to them, our very first touch point in the email or subject line, or if we've had this client, like I have had several clients for 10 plus years, right? I've had clients who have bought from me at every single company or law firm that they have worked at. And it's my job to still show them that I know them, to continue doing discovery, to understand what's going on with them, and to show up prepared for calls. So I think that's one of the things, right? I treat every single client like they are my only client and my only prospect. What company do they work for? Who do they know? Where have they worked before? Have they worked for any of my clients before? What city do they live in? Where do they go to college? What can I find out about them to create small talk? And I think that that's kind of the idea, right? Imagine if we had a hit list of like 10 or 15 people that we were going to meet at a conference. What would we talk about with them? What would we come prepared to lead the conversation? And if you think, well, nothing, I just hope they drive the call, well, then we're really setting ourselves up not for success. But think about that stuff. How can you have a few talking points prepared in advance? And that's exactly what we should be doing before we outreach over email, and exactly what we should be doing certainly before discovery calls. So I'll say that's one thing. I'll say another one, and then Alex would love your thoughts or feedback. But my mom used to say that when I was born with a firecracker lit under my bum. The amount of urgency I always displayed, right? It was go, 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 now, let's make it happen. And for those of you who are not just listening to the audio portion of this and looking at the video, you can see behind me that outside of Show Me, You Know Me, the second other thing framed on my wall is the urgent bird gets the worm. So we always talk about the early bird gets the worm, right? But the urgent bird, particularly in sales, is the person that gets the worm more often than not. And I think about this not only for like the speed at which we respond to, let's say, an inbound lead, a contact us form, an MQL, when somebody hits our website. I also think about it how we treat referrals. So for a play here, if I get a referral, if I don't respond by the end of the day to an inbound referral that's been made, you should call the authorities and assume I have died or something is terrible happening in my life, because come hell or high water, I'm going to respond urgently. But I'm also going to respond urgently with some show me, you know me. So I'm going to respond really quickly. I'm going to look at that person's profile. I'm going to see if I can find something common between the two of us, and then I'll send a response. Think about urgently in terms of how we submit proposals, how we get data, how we send thank you notes. There is so much to be said for urgency, and it shouldn't be a differentiator, but it is. A lot of people take their time. A lot of people think that not responding quickly or following up quickly allows you to be in control of the deal or not show your desperation. And I couldn't disagree more.
I mean, Sam, show me you know me is your ethos. So if you're not following Sam already, I am going to instruct you to follow Sam right now, and you can dig into show me you know me on Sam's page. But I do want to dig into this urgent bird gets the worm,
Yeah.
because you put a lot of great content out, even saying write handwritten notes to your deals that you've lost, right? I mean, you really go the extra mile, and that's not just hyperbole. But one thing that I always think about is that urgency could be misconstrued, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you could be, I don't want to say you could be too urgent, but how do you balance being urgent as a seller, but not being overbearing to your
Yeah.
prospects, your buyers?
I think one of the things to think about, one is kind of building that if this then that around urgency of things that you do quickly, right? So the things that are important, like responding to inbounds, MQLs, contact us, all of that stuff, right? I don't think the urgency displayed there won't be overbearing. I think the frequency at which we can be urgent, let's say, can be a challenge. So if let's say I want to nurture you, right, and I want to keep like a good consistent cadence, I can also be overbearing by nurturing you every single day, by sending a prospect, here's another link, and here's an article, and here's what I thought of you, and da 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 da. That can be a bit much. But I think from an urgency perspective, just think about the timelines we commit to ourselves, again, in that responsiveness, and then think about the timelines that we commit to our buyers. If I say to someone, today's Monday, I'm going to send you something by the close of business. It's Monday, right? Yeah, it's Monday. If I say I'm going to send you something by the close of business Wednesday, and let's say I don't have what that thing is, right? I'm still going to send you something. And I think that's also where a lot of people miss the mark. They'll say, I sent it to you on Friday because I didn't have what you needed on Wednesday. Well, you still made a commitment to me to send that. So why didn't you send me something? So I think thinking about those things in terms of our commitment time frame is important. I will say the other thing, right, is we talk about this a lot at Sam Sales, is manners as it's tied to sales. And I feel like manners isn't something we talk about in sales at all, unless you're Sam Sales. But think about this. Today, we met with a very, very large company, our first foot in the door for a massive conglomerate. We met with somebody who owns 90 sellers between VPs, directors, and then direct reports, who found me through LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. Who found me through LinkedIn, who really appreciates my content and then wants to figure out a way to get us in the door at this company. Now, what we did is we had an initial discovery call, and then that person said, I'm going to work with our sales enablement team, sales operations, and see how I can bring you in. Most reps will just be like, cool. And then we'll just sit and wait, but not us. And so what I mean by the kind of manners and thing to think about there is you now have an incredible buyer, initial prospective buyer, who should get a thank you note, who should get something in an email that just says, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate today. Really appreciate you even feeling like 30 minutes of time spent with us would be worth it. I really hope we didn't disappoint. Wouldn't say it just like that, but it's kind of that theme, right? And then saying, we appreciate it. We look forward to next steps. That's it. There's no ask. There's no additional requests in there. That's just modern manners. Thank you for your time. Now, I do think you can also go one level above and beyond, especially with somebody like that, where you're like, oh, that was a really, really good lead. And ask them for their mailing address. Hey, thanks again for your time today, this and that. By the way, I'd like to keep our records updated. If we ever have something to send you in the mail, it'd be great to have your mailing address. Would you be willing to share it with us? And then take the time to send a handwritten thank you note. And you do that after an initial discovery call when you were still so early stage, but it's with a great buyer and the right buyer persona. you'll make them fall out of their chair, right? They won't even know what hit them, but you just took the time to do that. Literally 7 minutes of your life, asking for the address, writing a thank you note, throwing a stamp and walking it to the end of your driveway or wherever you live. Huge, huge, huge thing that can make such an impact.
I love that because it is one of those things that is so simple and so kind, and nobody else will do it.
No.
So, not surprised at all to have seen the success that you've had. And kind of tying into that and maybe piggybacking off of that point, you were obviously an individual contributor for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're in leadership. Now you're running your own business. Again, you lead 13 women. What were some of the big takeaways that you learned when you went from an individual contributor, to a leader?
Oof. I think one thing I was completely unprepared for was just how leadership worked in terms of an organization. So like, what budget did I have availability to? Was I even supposed to ask for budget? How do I run one-on-ones? What's expected of me in terms of reviews? How do I have difficult conversations? I wasn't prepared for any of that. And for anyone that's listening that's in a leadership role, I'm willing to bet, right, that you probably didn't get a playbook to that either. You didn't get training. You didn't go through leadership coursework, right? There's some organizations who do fabulous jobs of things like that, right? I've heard great stories from Salesforce, from Oracle, from things like that. But most companies are just like, here's your book, here's your team, good luck, go hit your number, or we'll kill you. Maybe not that dramatic. But I think that was one of the things I was unprepared for. The other thing that I think happened to me that probably happens to a lot of people is I was promoted internally, right? So I grew inside an organization. I grew up in an organization. And I was now managing individuals that used to be my peers that I used to, trade stories with and say all kinds of weird things to. And now they were my reports. So I think one of the things with that is having honest one-on-one conversations to say, I know the landscape is changing a little bit for us. Like, what can I do to be a great leader to you? What can I do to be a great boss? What are your expectations of me? Let me tell you what I expect of myself for you. And I think that that's one thing for whoever goes into leadership, consider that we need to be one direct and specific about the expectations we have with our team, but we also need to tell them what the expectations are for them of us. And we miss that a lot. We show up with our demands. We say, do this, update your forecast by XYZ date, right? Make sure you have all your data in your CRM or, Insightly or whatever it is platform that you use. Make sure that that's up to date and done. But what about us? What should they expect from us? Should we offer coaching? Should we come prepared with agendas for our one-on-ones? And I think that also sets the bar in such a different way for you, with your peers who are now your direct reports or who you're taking over as a brand new team. I will say one more thing. I think the other part is understanding how to show up correctly as a leader now with cross-functional partners. So what kind of relationships do I need to build? How do those differ, being a leader versus an IC? And how do I also balance fighting for my team and then also looking out for the right things for a company? So all I really want to do is just yell at my general counsel and my sales ops and tell them to move with the speed that we move with, and why we sent these red lines 6 minutes ago. Why don't we have them back yet? And that's what I really want to do. But I can't do that if I want to build long-term relationships with those cross-functional partners. And if I want them to do favors for me when I really need it, like at 6 o'clock on New Year's Eve when I still need to get a deal in, right? So finding that balance and making sure to prioritize building those relationships at the executive level was key for me.
I love what you said at the very beginning there when you're becoming a leader of someone who you were just a peer of and you say, hey, I know the landscape is changing. Like, that's a really great expectation setter right at the forefront, to your point. So let's maybe dig into that a little bit more. Let me back up. How do you look at sales differently now from a leader versus an IC, right? I'm sure your perspective of sales has changed. Again, now you're leading people versus going out and doing all the hunting yourself. You're now a buyer when you need vendors. So what were some big takeaways there?
I think one thing that was hard for me was to remember to not micromanage every single deal that I was running for my team. So it's especially if you are a top performer, it is very easy to get on a one-on-one or a forecast call, ask questions about a deal, and then be like, well, why haven't you done these other 8 things? And the person's like, well, I don't know. that's not what I do. And you're like, just, can you invite me to the next call and make sure I'm on it? It's so quick. It's so easy to do that and just like shove the person out of the way and then want to run the deal yourself. But you cannot do that. You will kill yourself. And also you're not doing what you were put in that leadership role to do, which is to scale your talents to somebody else. So I think this is where the coaching piece is so, so important, right? That's something that I look at in a different lens, is making sure like I want to teach you, I don't want to fish. I want to teach you to fish. So then I can just sit back and wait for you to bring everything to me the same way that I went and got all of my deals. I think one more thing to think about, right, is like how segmentation was so important to me when I became a leader. And I think we trust our reps to just do the right thing, to go after the right accounts, to, you know, be doing all these things correctly and going after the lowest hanging fruit. But dig into the segmentation of your reps. How are you attacking your book of business? Why have you prioritized these 10 accounts over these other 40 accounts? Talk to me through that. Other thing I'll say, especially from a leadership perspective, it is very easy for you to get questions from your reps and to say, this is how I do it, or this is how you would do it. And what I would encourage you to do is to say, I've got some ideas, but tell me how you would do it first. And from a leadership POV, right, for us, it gives us an opportunity to see what's in their head, to look at the cracks, potential cracks in their foundation. And instead of instructing, we're asking, right? We're getting to see how they think, how they process logic, how they deductively reason, all that stuff before we just shove our answer, you know, to them. I think as a buyer, right, from a leadership perspective, I've also seen this, right? How, I'll say this as nicely as I can, how bad discovery calls and demos are. And I also see this as a coach, right? This is part of what we do. We do call breakdowns, we pull deals apart, we do strategic call reviews, and we're like, have you looked at the most obvious courses of action? But I find that we really miss the foundations of sales, right? So as a buyer, you know, I was just on a call just before this, Alex, which why I was a couple of minutes late for our podcast. I was on a call and I was here. I wanted to see something very specific. You know, I said, like, I want you to show me how you guys make sandwiches, let's say, for example. And they were like, oh my gosh, we have so many soups, and let us tell you about these lettuces that we have. And then when you bring in the carrots, holy moly. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. What I'm really concerned about is the sandwich. So like, what's the bread you choose? How do you layer the meats? Tell me about that specifically. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So first of all, you can definitely get half a sandwich with a half of a soup. And have I told you about our soups? Oh my God. Tell me about your sandwiches. So I think this is the thing, right? Like as sellers, we come with buyers. Sometimes we're nervous. Sometimes we don't know where to go. Sometimes we just talk about whatever the hell it is that we want to talk about. Our slides, you know, that are not bespoke and that are specific to just what the clients, what our companies put together. Instead of saying, tell me a little bit about why you showed up today. Tell me a little bit about your team, your platform, your challenges. Tell me a little bit about your overall landscape of your company. How can I help you? Sales at the end of the day is solving somebody's challenge. That's it. That's what we're here to do. And I don't know, 80% of the time, it's not going to be something that we do. 60, 70% of the time, it's not going to be something that we do. But you'll set yourself up for long-term success if you just show up and ask, have that conversation and say, tell me about your challenges and let me see if hopefully I can solve them for you, or I can recommend somebody else who can. That's how you play the long game. That's how you build long-term relationships.
So many good points in there. One I want to highlight, especially, sorry about that, is when you're a manager and you're managing someone, rather than instructing and demanding, you do it this way, this is how we do things. How do you think you should do that first, right? Asking them, like, how would you do this before I tell you what you're going to do? I think that's a great way to not only hear out your reps, but to your point, get in their head, right? What are they thinking? Why are they thinking it? So that was an incredible clip. Sam, obviously you have a lot of experience, not only at LinkedIn, prospecting on LinkedIn. You've had a lot of success with both. Why don't you give us some sales nav tips? I know we chatted about that a little bit pre-show, and I don't have a nice tie-in, but let's just hear it.
It's a good segue. I think we talk about how hard sales is all the time, and I think we make it so unnecessarily difficult on ourselves because we don't leverage the data that we have in a smart way. So if you are a company that has 3 clients and a couple of leaders and maybe some advocates or people who have invested in you or whatever, you've got about all the data you need to get cooking in a really smart way. So let's think about Navigator and how you can do that. I'll give you a couple of tips here. One, if you haven't looked in Navigator to pull a search that says, tell me everybody my CEO knows that is my ICP and the buyer persona that I'm looking for. Number one, who does your boss know? Who does your CEO know? Who does your VP of sales, your CRO, your VP of enablement, whatever it may be? Look at every executive that you have at your company, small or big, right? Whoever's in your sphere of influence, and say, who do they know that's in my territory? And that is the buyer persona or the influencer that I want to get in front of, and do that. Pull up your advanced search, go into your leads, and then just fill out the parameters, right? Put in your top 100 accounts. Yes, it's going to take time. Can you do this over Thanksgiving when you're trying to skip your family? You sure can. Or whatever holiday you're coming up and celebrating. That's one thing I would do. And then reach out to that person and ask for an introduction. I would also try to narrow that search down. So let's say if somebody on my team looks and says, who does Sam know in these 100 accounts? They're going to get back 10,000 responses, right? Of 10,000 contacts. So start to narrow it down. Who lives in DC? Who used to work at LinkedIn? Who used to work at On24? How can I narrow it down and actually find key people that there's a higher likelihood that Sam knows well and that can help introduce me? One other thing that I would look at is looking to your own previous employers. Who has worked previously at the companies I've worked at previously that is now either working at that company that in my territory or that works that is that buyer persona and that core ICP that I'm trying to get into. We miss the mark on that all the time, and you can leverage that. That's great. Show me, you know me. And then one other thing that I would do in your searches is in current company, put in again, top 100, top 50, top whatever accounts you have. And then for past company, go to your marketing team, your account management team. Who are our best clients? Who love us? Who have signed on for 3, 5, 6-year deals? Who is on our customer advisory board? Who has purchased us for 100 years previously? Put those company in past company. Then for title, territory, etc., put in the buyer persona, the geography, and pull people who used to work for your best clients who now currently work for your prospects. Great. Show me, you know me as well. How do you help us get in the door? I think the last thing that I would say, right, is the beneficial use of Team Link Extend. And that is something that you have accessibility to in Navigator. Just looking at some of the people that you want to get in front of and say, who do they know? Who do they know not only that I know, but who do they know that I may not even know exists as an employee in our company? And I say this, like, that last tip is probably the most obvious thing, is probably the thing that most of your listeners are saying, well, duh. But I would tell you, when's the last time you did it? Because every strategic deal review that we do, every time we dig into something and we say, how are you getting into this account? And we say, who do they know that you know on LinkedIn? And they're like, oh, let me look. And you're like, okay, you do that. So this is some of the stuff that should be the most obvious stuff that we do. And creating those searches and saving them out can create a lead machine for us, right? We don't even have to work that hard. It's awesome.
So much gold in there. Going to do a lot of chopping up of all those clips. I know all of the folks who are listening that use Sales Nav just got so much value out of that. And to your point, there are things that aren't necessarily complicated, but are you doing them? And clearly in your example, as you said, a lot of folks are not.
Not so much.
As you alluded to when we started, we could probably go on about this for 8 hours. Sadly, we're running out of time. You're extremely busy. We had to book this a couple months in advance. You run a very tight schedule and you're very busy. So why don't you take a moment here to plug something with the audience and maybe any last takeaways that you want to give on your way out. And thank you so much for your time again.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, come say hello on LinkedIn, of course. If you pop over to samsalesconsulting.com, you can sign up for our newsletter. It comes out every Friday. It's pretty funny, but tons of actionable tips of what you guys can do. We advertise, of course, our podcast and everything there. And then I'll tell you, like, if you're looking for some extra credit and homework and things to do to really up your game, look at shorts.samsalesconsulting.com. We have our subscriptions there for sales or leadership's coming out soon. And then Sales Nav and LinkedIn. It is super inexpensive and will teach you so much tangible, practical tips that you can learn and put in your game right away to succeed.
There you go, folks. Make sure you follow Sam on LinkedIn. Make sure you check out those shorts. I can personally attest, one of the best content creators out there right here on the very Zoom with me. So go check out her shorts, go check out her content, go sign up for Sam Sales if you're looking to take your outbound process to the next level. Sam, can't say enough great things. Thank you so much for your time here today, sharing your wisdom with us all. Seriously, means the world.
Thanks, man. Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet everyone.
Absolutely. Sales Stories in Real Life, fam. We will see you next week. Thank you, guys.